you're going through life and you want to make this film, and you haven't got the time, you haven't got the money, but all of a sudden there's a tiny little window that becomes ajar, right? And you push the window open and you go out and make the film.
Welcome to the series in which I, Jason Verney, filmmaker, video artist and writer, introduce to you interesting individuals from the world of filmmaking. In this second episode, we talk to Lindsay McAuley, an accomplished filmmaker, visual artist and well-travelled author. So here we are with another guest, and this time it's Lindsay McAuley. Would you prefer Lindsay or Lindsay?
I get called Linz quite often, just Linz, L-I-N-Z. My art name, which I've adopted, is L-I-N-Z-I, which is like, I like Linz, yeah.
Oh, yes, I saw that on your website, lindsaymccauley.com. Yeah, I saw that. It was quite a nice bit of artwork, actually.
Yeah, we knocked that together. Yeah, I think it seems to be important to have a website, and you, having done a lot of work, we're obligated to self-promote, even though I'm a little bit reserved about that. I'm a little bit backward and coming forward, but I have to overcome that.
Yeah, well, it's not. You're doing the exact right thing when you're an artist or filmmaker. You don't necessarily need to promote yourself. You can have people that do it. Or, what you're meaning is you're coming from a proper. It's what your grassroots is. The subjects you're interested in, the art and the the writing, and everything. So, before we get into more about Lindsay, I just want to introduce you a bit more about Lindsay McAuley and also where we are. We both happen to be in Thailand. We're in a beach town or city called Pattaya, and we, funnily enough, have some filmmaking, let's say, talents that cross over a little bit. I think also with my partner and our sort of collective friend, Thida, Nathalie. I think a couple of your films or the subject matters that you cover might sort of edge into stuff that she talks about as well, but not quite the same. Where everybody's things are different. Yeah. But just to say a bit more about Lindsay, basically he's a filmmaker, a visual artist, an author, adventurer, social activist, and other. Is there something you're missing?
I think you've covered it pretty well there, Jason. But thank you for taking the time to interview me as well. I'm quite honoured to sort of people that even to bother talking to me about things I've done. But I guess I've done a fair bit. So yeah, I guess I could talk about my early background, that I grew up in a sheep and cattle station in outback Australia, and that is where I took an interest, because when on a dark night in the outback you can see stars everywhere, and so that sort of inspired me to study that field, and that led into, and also art was a fascination. So those two things, astronomy and art, are my essential ingredient, I guess, if that's the right word. And then it wasn't until later in life that I brought those two together, and I guess that's, if you go on my website, there's an art project I built called the Sky Harp.
Yes.
And that basically was aligned with the equinox and the solstice, and it was very mathematical, but it also incorporated like the artistic beauty of it. So it was a sculpture which I built where, when the sun moves across the horizon, the shadows changed on the background, and the sun shone through some circles and aligned perfectly during the equinox. And so there was only like 15 minutes twice a year where everything worked perfectly. Sorry if I can go on with that. And that was like, and I had the idea. Well, the idea came to me, and I thought, oh my God, am I going to do this? And I thought, yes, I committed to it. and I built the sculpture in the outback away from people. And I thought, if I can't make this work perfectly, I'm just going to pull it down, throw it away, and tell nobody. However, it did, and in my opinion, worked perfectly, where the sun shone through these circles and created this perfect interlock circles on this background I had. And the first equinox, where I went to photograph it, the clouds came in and there was no sunrise, so I couldn't photograph it. So I had to wait 6 months before I could go back to the artwork and film it, photograph it properly.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting, actually. But I was going to just say a couple of other things I should probably mention. Well, first of all, seeing as this podcast is the Micro Filmmakers podcast, a part of our newsletter, was that particular thing that you did with the eclipse and equinox. I remember those two words beginning with E, and the other thing you just mentioned. What was it? The eclipse, the equinox, and something else. No, it doesn't matter. But basically, what I was going to say was, partly because this podcast is designed around film, you even though you say you weren't sure, you could just forget about it, but you did decide to film it. So I was actually intrigued that you filmed it quite very professionally as well, you know, and very, you know, it's not like you just put one camera up and you just let it go. You've done a really good job of that. So
it was a bit of a process building the artwork and making a film at the same time, because I thought that as what did happen is that the land was sold, and therefore the people who bought the land didn't want the artwork there, and I went out there and the artwork was thrown down behind the back of the chook shed, which was a bit devastating, right? But I knew it was a prototype,
right.
And I knew that the work would exist in the digital world, meaning photographed, and on the internet as a film. So that I made a 15-minute film during the process, as a archival thing,
That's what I've actually seen, the 15 minute one. And the reason I'm, again, sort of interjecting with this is because not only did you... I remember when you said to me about, I was going to watch it, and you said just it's meant to be an immersive experience. So when you were filming it, did you take into account the audio straight away? Because immersive in, obviously, sorry, I'm getting this wrong, it's not just immersive in the sound, but it's immersive in what you see. But I could also hear the sounds with the poles, maybe screws. It was almost... How did you get that down to the right sound, or was that just coincidence that it sounded great?
Oh no, I spent a lot of time getting the sound right, because there's something I understand about filmmaking is that the human ear can appreciate sound, and if there's like a subtle frequency change or something wrong with the sound, people get sort of like unnerved. But people can handle bad vision, but they can't handle bad sound. The sound has to be right up as right up to scratch, in my opinion, because the human eye just gets used to like low quality vision and just accepts that. And then but sound, the mind or the ear doesn't like bad sound.
Well, funny enough, actually, as I say, this is all about filmmaking, and one thing that's taught at film schools or by filmmakers is whatever you do, get the sound right, because of what you've just said. You can have, the picture can be as arty as you want and experimental as you want, but if you have a grating sound, people are going to tune out and tune away from it. And I just I'm going to finish talking about, because we're going to try and stick to film where possible, but because you're an author and you're an artist as well as a visual artist, and a filmmaker, I want to kind of keep coming back to this topic of film, but going back to what you shot that was over that period, with the great soundscape and the great look, you caught the sun. Obviously, it looked amazing. And I don't know whether that was because it's in Australia, you're very lucky to have great sunsets, but obviously Australia's a massive place, so I guess it's not everywhere. That particular place where you filmed it, did you knew that it was going to look great, did you, on the camera?
Well, I guess it's, yeah, I think filmmaking's about the light on a given moment, because I think even the most beautiful place can look fairly, not ordinary, but if the light is right, then it just magnifies the image, tenfold. So you can find a fairly ordinary place, and if you shoot it at the right time, it's so far ahead. Like the place where I shot it, you would not sort of like count that as one, like the seventh wonder of the world. But because so you got to really work with the light. To really enhance what you're doing or shooting.
Yeah, there was the one particular part I'm noticing with that sun was that it was kind of there in the background behind you almost, and then you walked away out of shot and left it there. And I thought, wow, that sun, it really lingers. Again, I know that it's not just about the sun. I will also add that Lindsay's film that we're talking about, this particular one, the name escapes me right now.
It's called Perfect Almost.
Oh yeah.
So which is like a play on words, as opposed to almost perfect.
Yeah.
Which is connecting with the mathematics.
Yeah.
Because essentially that was the reason why I built the artwork, is because I came to a realization of the mathematics of a circle holds most of the calculations for the orbits of the planets in our solar system.
Yeah.
And so that was very at the foundation of this is what I needed to say, and that's why I made the film and made the artwork, is to express that very simple, virtually elementary mathematical calculations, provided you know the circumference, that all the rest of the ratios of the diameter and etc. relate to the orbits of the planets in their.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's a load of information in that 14 minutes about different planets and what they do and where they revolve and stuff, and there's so much to take in. It's pretty amazing. But at the end, it does say this was used to show time, etc. Let's just say etc. The reason what I mean is I sat there at the end thinking, well, this filmmaker, and I call you a scientist. I don't know if that's the right word. I thought, wow, what he's discovered is right up there with, Einstein or something.
Well,
it's something that you've managed to find a different way of telling things.
It's a totally different angle. I'm probably more intuitive than I am a scientist or a conduit. So, because I'm not that not that great with mathematics, surprisingly. I've learnt the road. However, it's not I don't see it. Mathematics is my forte. I think my forte is being a conduit for certain information, and then so it comes out of wherever, the cosmos, and therefore I have to. I don't have to deal with it, but I choose to deal with it and try to recreate it and present it in a way that's that I can communicate it to an audience. So that was essentially what that art is about the mathematics, and I'm presenting it in a way that was beautiful and beauty.
Yeah, beautiful, immersive. I mean, immersive, the video at least. And I would say you're some kind of astronomical artist.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's... One thing I will say is something that I was meant to mention at the beginning, or probably perhaps should have mentioned it, that Lindsay has been to 37 countries. Actually, that was posted on your website. Have you been to more since then? I will say one more thing which relates to where we are, because we're in Thailand. One of those places he had been to is Thailand. He's revisiting it. I'm sure he'll tell you a bit more about that. But I just wondered, have you visited any more since that was that let's say buzz statement was made that you visited 37?
No, I have been to 37 different countries and 7 continents and 1 planet at the moment.
Right.
But I am going to add Cambodia to the list. You know, like sometimes I thought 37 countries was pretty impressive, but I've met people who've been to 100 or more, and I thought, oh my God, I'm just going to shut up about this.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that I've been to 37 countries, because you know when. You know, I have kicked up a bit of dust.
Yeah. Well, you'll certainly kick up a bit of dust in Cambodia or Siem Reap, because there's a lot of sandy areas there. And well, I can see why you'll like Cambodia because of the temples, for example. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons you're going, because of Siem Reap and Angkor Wat. And the reason I say that is because one of your big subject matters, and again has been documented on a film or two, I think, relates to Maya people. And so
the Maya civilization in Guatemala. I wrote a book about my an understanding I came to, where I believe I understand what system of measurement they used 2,000 years ago. And their measurement system correlates with time, which is like pretty hard to explain here in the audio. But say it's about 252 millimeters long, and it's equal to 1 day. So if you imagine a temple, and the width of it was say 365 increments of 62 millimeters. Therefore, you know that the horizontal plane is equal to a year, being 365, right? And so if you, it's a bit hard to explain here, but but anyway, so that particular unit of measurement is equal to 1 day, and I found 5 calendar periods out of there. I'm sure you've heard of the Maya calendar, fitting into the temple in Mexico with 99.7% accuracy.
Oh. Wow. Well, there's 2 things again leading off from that. One, because this is about filmmaking, so I wanted to ask you about the film projects that you've done in, let's say, in parallel with your Maya findings. If I'm right, if I've got that description wrong, then let me know. And the other thing is, all these findings that you seem to have, or this, like the planetary thing, and the eclipse and the time, and this one with Maya, and you've discovered something that you that hasn't been thought of before. Surely you've gone to people higher up, and you've decided. You know, I just wondered.
Well, I was actually going to make a film on what I discovered, but it became so because filmmaking is quite logistically difficult with tripods, crews, sound, camera, etc. I'd redirected my energy toward writing a book, and so I've written a book, and I've also written research papers and submitted it to. It's on this website called Academia, and I don't know what it is, but it's a bit disillusioning, but it hasn't stopped me yet. But I'm just not getting the feedback that I would hoped. You know, I think I'm sort of, I've done the work, and I think I've done all this, and it's like, you know, does anyone sort of care? You know, like really? Quite devastating in a sense, like really devastating. But then I think about, why do I do these things? You know, well, essentially it is, if you see something, you want to communicate it, and if people don't hear you, it's like, well, you know, hello.
It's a bit. That's exactly what it is. It's a bit like filmmaking. You know, you can spend ages making a film. Doesn't mean many people are going to see it. And what you said about, I will ask you in a bit about filmmaking and your sort of your experience in kind of teaching or guiding people. We'll leave that for later. But I was interested in a couple of things you said. But going back to the fact that you're talking about setups and tripods and all this kind of stuff, but it does seem like you are sitting on a gold mine of these discoveries that no one seems to want to listen to you. But filmmaking is, of course, one good way of evidencing it. So that if at some point people go, hang on, I mean, if only to say that you were the one that discovered it.
Yeah.
I mean, there must be times when you might think, well, someone else is going to come across this if I don't.
Oh, I think if it's around long enough, someone will either interrogate it enough to dispute it, which I'm happy to engage with anyone who wants to dialogue on that level, scientifically, mathematically, whatever. I'm not hesitant about that. I'm pretty confident that, yes, I've somehow managed to intuitively diagnose a temple and work out and I really... Like the odd thing, I went to this temple in Mexico, and the feeling was that I knew what they did there. Like I had the feeling I knew what they did there, but intellectually I didn't know what the hell they did there. So, but it took me a solid over a year to work out that I actually did know what they did there. So everything was backwards.
Was it just a sense?
Yeah, like you could probably put it into some sort of psychic thing, perhaps. Well, let's not use that word, but let's use that word. And intuitive or a conduit, for that information.
Yeah, absolutely.
But intellectually, I didn't know that until I interrogated it mentally for a long period of time to actually prove to myself, well, yes, I did. I reckon I do know what they did 2,000 years ago and what their intention was, and how they incorporated time and space in architecture, which is like an incredibly abstract way of doing things, to actually bring time into a physical. That's one thing I heard there a while ago, which is interesting. Is like when you've got time and space at those two ends. So one person actually said that architecture is space, but film is time, because films actually are only interacting with you while you've pressed the play button. Once the film's finished, it doesn't exist. Whereas architecture is put in that parameter of space, whereas film is in time. Those two polarities.
Right. So, do you think there's an element of time travel, but in not the way that we know it? Like, because you're talking about film and recording and stuff, you don't mean there's an element of time travel, and am I just putting words into your mouth there?
Well, in a sense, I guess there is time travel. Right. But essentially, if you're just looking at those two mediums, those art mediums, architecture being space, solid, not moving, whereas film is ephemeral, and it doesn't exist. It only exists while you're watching it,
that's true.
and then it's gone. You know?
I mean, I say that because a lot of the stuff you talk about is way, I'm going to admit it, is way above me. It's all fascinating. Your films do probably make it easier to understand.
No, I've tried to. That's a bit of a contest in people's minds, I guess. Do we talk down to the audience? Meaning, like, do we just assume the audience is not at the same level? Because, say, for instance, like, maybe you don't understand the mathematics of what I'm talking at the moment. However, if you were to, like, if you were inclined that way, if you sort of studied that field, you would catch up pretty quick. Because so all of a sudden you're at that level. So when I don't want to talk down to the audience, or I assume the audience has the capacity to interrogate what I'm doing and evolve into that. We were talking earlier about, like, for people who have an idea to make a film. There's a lot of, there's a few things I'd like to mention about that. Normally there's a window, what I call a window of opportunity, right? So you're going through life and you want to make this film, and you haven't got the time, you haven't got the money, but all of a sudden there's a tiny little window that becomes ajar, right? And you see it, the window meaning an opportunity or a little time frame where you can squeeze in, and you push the window open and you go out and make the film. And then the other thing I think you need a story. You need to know what you want to say in a film. Essentially, you need that as a primary
narrative
element. And then forget about the camera gear. That'll come.
Yeah.
But if you have the idea, and if you make a decision, and then you have a sense of urgency to actually get it done. So even at the cost of sort of like not getting it perfect, but getting it done is far more essentially important than making it perfect, because it'll be perfect in its own right anyway. But
yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah. And you've kind of taught these ethics. You've kind of taught these as 2 pointers when you've taught people about filmmaking. Is that right?
I ran a course in Outback Australia where I taught grade 11 kids filmmaking, in an outback town, how to find a story, how to engage with the local community and find people interesting, because remarkably, even though if you're stuck out in the middle of nowhere where I grew up, there are pretty interesting people out there that have a life and have a background. And I found we was in a small town and just happened to find a plumber that they all knew he was a plumber, right? But they didn't know he was totally blind, and he ran his own business. So there's a good story. Couldn't, one eye missing and the other one's totally didn't work. So you can't get much more blinder than that, unless you drink a lot.
Blind drunk. That reminds me, actually, just off the topic, but it reminds me of a very well-known cult Australian film called, oh my god, what's it called? Drifting. Oh my god, it's all about this drink. It's a horror film where someone has to just keep drinking. You might know which one I mean. Oh, I'll have to look it up later. Something. Anyway, off the topic there, so we might have to edit this out. But yeah, what you were just saying about finding a story, with Thida, Nathalie, for example, that's how she kind of runs with a lot of her documentary ideas. She's always finding stuff. But one thing that also she does, and she's not alone in it, but she's done 1 or 2 films which are mixing documentary with fiction. So they're primarily fiction, but you're using footage. And what I thought was, at least one of yours that I've seen, it's fiction in the fact that it's to do with after. Well, okay, I'm gonna be careful what I say here, because I might offend people who do believe in this. But it's a fiction short film. This is my explanation. You can correct me in a second. But it deals with suicide and afterlife as a work of fiction, but that doesn't mean to say it is. That's what I would say. Now, I just think it was a great piece of work because it's a narrative short film. It can be understood by anybody. It's not being too scientific, but the underlying bit, there is more to it, and you're trying to help people. Is that right?
There's no mathematics in that story whatsoever. No, it was essentially like where did that come from? It actually came from the visuals, really, like the visuals I had, and the story, it was sort of not in the background, but the visuals were like these signposts, right? Of what, where, when, why, because these are the questions that probably throughout the entire day, those W words, called the W word, right? We're always asking something like that. When will I be happy? Where is the bus stop? How long is it going to take to get this film made? Yeah, and that's why I call it the W word, and it was just interesting. And then the actual W word the essential W word in the film you won't find out until the end unless you're pretty good at guessing. But yeah, and I guess suicide prevention more so than suicide. But the idea was that for people who weren't feeling that great and were about to take the exit off the highway, which I call it, may reconsider that the fact that whatever problems they have here, they're not going to get rid of by jumping off a bridge. It's actually going to, and that's up to all different philosophies of what happens in the next life. So the whole film is set in the next life, or the afterlife, and that's where it begins. And it has one actor, a horse, a dog, and a cockatoo.
Yeah. How long did you draft it? Did you even do a draft script? And how long did you film it? And did you work almost alone, or was it a few people?
Oh, a very small crew. The actor, my sound assistant, I operated the camera and directed, and there was a friend of ours, Leanne, who did sort of held the reflector board and sorted out the catering, and it was like a pretty difficult experience, actually. Very difficult. Tried making a film in knee-deep water with a very small number of assistants, and cold as, like, for some reason it was supposed to be hot, but the actor froze in the water, nearly got hypothermia, and well, everyone was, I guess, I think it probably, there was a lot of suicide around it. Someone committed suicide on the location before we got there, that we didn't even know. And they're probably not backward in coming forward. The fact that they actually have contemplated the idea of suicide. So the actor was in that zone. The camera assistant was as well. Making the film was putting me there as well.
You wanted to end it all.
No, it was heavy. It's a heavy film, and very heavy, and took a lot of editing to shake off a lot of time after that to shake off the really quite dark heaviness that sort of was around it, because of all the subjects pretty bloody dark and heavy.
A lot more people think about suicide than what we think. It's like it's very. A friend of mine said once before, and he's like, everyone thinks about suicide at some point in their life. And now I'm not saying he was any great philosopher. He was just saying that I thought, well, maybe there is some truth, because even if it's a split second, you think of you've had a really bad day and you think, oh, I want to. This is But obviously this is more serious. And I will say one more thing. Well, you mentioned this at the beginning that the website, Lindsay's website, lindsaymcaulley.com, does contain all this information, including what he means or meant to do with that film and what it's meant to do to help people. Is that right?
Well, that was the intention.
Yeah.
Artistically, I like the idea of the signs, but the intention was, well, I hope the hell people might reconsider, but it's a very complex subject, and I'm not a social worker trained in that area at all, and I don't know what kind of effect it would have on people who go down that road, really, tell you the truth. But a philosophy professor viewed it, and he felt it was really interesting, some of the not stereotypical, but some of the character in the film, how he just quite self-centered and quite sort of angry with the world, and the actual cockatoo is really an aspect of him, and so the cockatoo talks to him in the way he talks to the world. So she's quite narky and impatient and sort of like jabbing dialogue-wise, provoking, him into the realisation of what the end of I have to watch the end of the film to find out what that is, but
Yeah, well, I was going to just ask about these films. So there's the Sky Heart project, which we talked about earlier, with the planets and the construction that the structure you made, and the W Word, and even the other ones, Maya ones. Have any of them? Did you at least submit to a couple of art film festivals, or even?
I submitted the W Word to quite a few competitions, and it failed miserably, which is really surprising. Like I'm in a bit of shock about that as well. Like,
but was it even selected? Not
no,
really.
It wasn't even. Didn't even get off the.
It's a bit of a minefield out there.
Yeah, it is. And and these film festivals, like I'm a little bit sort of, what's the word, jaded about, because I think there's too much. I think a film festival should be where all the films are put in a box and it's shaken, and whatever falls out, the first three that fall out are the ones chosen randomly by the universe, as opposed to people intellectualizing about what should or shouldn't be shown, so or there should be at least one festival like that somewhere on Earth where the universe chooses what film is the winner, as opposed to all these like intellectuals interrogating it from what's the camera work like and what's this like, and etc. etc.
Yeah, and I agree, because it takes ages when you do get in a selection, or even if you don't. It's so disheartening. It can ruin your whole next project and your next thoughts. I mean, maybe not from someone like you, who I know it did, but you've got other stuff that you think about, you create. But for some people as well, it's the end. If someone doesn't at least say you did well, try again. But if they don't even say that, you just think, oh God, nobody likes it. Whereas there are people that liked it. But
and we are reliant on what other, because we can create these things in order to communicate to other people. And if there's no communication feedback, that's sort of like we see as either positive or negative, or just like nothing. It's quite devastating for a lot of people, and they think, oh, what's the point of doing that exercise? But really, essentially, whatever we do, it's about us anyway, I guess. Even though we want to communicate, we're the storytellers, and we create the artwork, and it comes from us, so therefore it's part of us.
Yeah, so we've got ourselves to blame.
Yeah.
I just say we've got ourselves to blame in the fact that we create this. We could just keep these ideas to ourselves, and we go out and make them, and we, there's no entitlement, but at the same time, we feel like we know it's a brilliant idea. At least if one festival selects it, it will be great. It'll just be thank you. I'll feel a bit better. Now we've spoken quite about. We've actually touched on quite a few of your projects. We've talked about the film and suicide. We've touched about the W Word. We've spoken about the Maya connections very briefly. But I want to just speak about, now this is slightly less to do with film. It doesn't mean you haven't got any film projects up your sleeve. But with Maya, I'd say your knowledge about Maya is so much more massive than mine. But I feel like there's some parallels with Asia, certain parts of Asia. I was saying about Angkor Wat, but I really don't know enough about the kingdoms and the communities. And has Asia intrigued you in a similar way, or is it completely separate?
Well, no, there is the I don't know if anyone who's listening, probably a lot of people are familiar with the Olmec statues in Mexico, and they're like these large headstones, right? They're probably like 2.5 meters high. Probably 2 meters high, but they're like massive. And when you first look at them, you think they look like they're from Africa. Facial features are from Africa, right? So what I'm doing here, apart from having a good time and having fun, I'm just observing facial features of some of the people I'm coming across here in this country and Cambodia. And so when you look at those stones in Mexico, or those statues, they're brown, right, for a start, because the stone is brown. And I'm thinking maybe that's a trigger to actually make the mind think Negro background, So then I thought, what would happen if I coloured that a certain colour, like Caucasian colour, and not only that, but actually find faces here which I have seen actually. I have seen faces that could resemble. So there's something I'm investigating is the fact that those statues are not from Africa, or the Olmecs are not from Africa, but there's a origin somewhere here in Southeast Asia, or China or Japan, but because I'm doing that as well as going to Siam Reap and study the equinox, coming up shortly.
Well, I've thought for a long time, and I know I'm not the only one, that Southeast Asians and Africans have a lot of similar features, and so much so that they almost do seem like the sister of somebody, sister or brother of somebody in that part of the world. Of course, Africa's massive as well, but I do feel like there's some connections. I went recently, and again, this could be off the record, but off the episode, but I went to Kanchanaburi, where the bridge over the River Kwai is, where that tourist hotspot is. Yep. And I was just going to say that as you go there, and Thida will know about this because of the border with Burma and stuff, you do start to see very different Thais, Thai people, and it's, well, at least I started noticing it this time more, because I don't normally go to those areas. And it's amazing how, and it would only be a little more of a twist, and then they'll look a bit more African than they would.
That's right. Like, quite. I'm looking at faces here now, and some of them are quite ovals. There's a very distinct difference between a lot of Asian faces, so pretty hard to make a characteristic. But there's a lot of very round faces, and fairly large lips, like those statues in Mexico. And the statue didn't have a pronounced eyelid, like the Asian eye hasn't got that recess, above the eye. That's a distinctive difference. Someone getting tattooed, to make them look Western. So, along with that fact, and I might even interrogate Angle what mathematically, which would be a bit of a contest, but
loads of temples.
Yeah, heaps of temples, and so that's a thing that I might even write a book about that, but I might make another film too. Well, about how to start a revolution.
People do that, and that's great, especially if you come from an angle of, I don't know, scientific revolution or something. I don't know what you mean. Social, because he is a social activist as well. We've got some common ground where I'm an activist, but I was just going to say another thing. Do you have any projects, film or book, that you are I'm sure you do, because you're an artist, you're probably always working on something, but is there something you've been working on, you really want to get out, either book, film, or some other medium?
I started writing a book called The Freedom Book a couple of years ago, where I would interview different people about what their interpretation of that word means to them, and it was that's quite a story all on its own, actually. The amount of different people's viewpoints on what that word means to them, and that word is thrown about quite loosely by politicians. They use it to sort of stir the people. We'll give you freedom to do this and freedom to do that.
Different levels.
So that's a book that I may write. It's a very difficult book to write, actually. But then there's a film I'm thinking about making, which is a black comedy. I'm not calling it a black comedy, but it's actually it could start sort of something rolling if I make it. It's
take it too seriously.
I'm going to keep that one a little bit quiet at the moment. If we've got to pull it together yet, but yeah.
Well, we could talk for a lot longer. I recently met Lindsay, and we had a lot in common. We had a nice chat, and as I say, we thought we would. Well, we'll leave you with the sounds of where we're sitting right now, which is essentially around a swimming pool. We thought that's the great sort of beach town kind of vibe, without going down to the beach where you wouldn't be able to hear anything. But this is
We are in a very vibrant part of the world, Thailand, and where there's so much colour, activity, and the people here just so unbelievably beautiful people, warm, etc.
Yeah. So, Lindsay, thank you very much, and we'll put some links in the description to your works, and we look forward to seeing the next stuff from you, or hearing where these developments have gone.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
It's been wonderful.
You've been listening to the MBF Micro Budget Filmmakers podcast. If you'd like to hear more of these episodes and check out any you may have missed, please subscribe via Spreaker or wherever you get your podcast fix. And if you want to continue to have access to filmmaker tips, events, and exclusive interviews, do sign up for the next Micro Budget Filmmakers newsletter. You'll be able to read exclusive interviews, attend workshops, and ultimately mingle with like-minded creative folk, as well as speak to more great people in the world of film.